Hey friends, this is Aaron Summers, and welcome to the Church Brain Podcast. Each week, we help church leaders navigate stress and transition with calm, practical leadership guidance for real ministry situations. Are you ready? Let's jump in. All right, so leadership transitions create uncertainty, and uncertainty, well, that makes people nervous. And nervous churches don't just worry quietly. Anxiety spreads through conversations and assumptions and reactions. This week, in the newsletter briefing, we talked about why churches panic during leadership change. In this podcast, I want to talk to you about how that panic spreads across a congregation and how leaders can help calm it. When a pastor leaves or leadership changes, churches lose a sense of stability. Their captain is gone. The leader is gone. And the natural reaction is that people start wondering what's going to happen next. Who takes care of next Sunday? Who's going to take care of this project? Who's going to handle this counseling session? Who's going to... And the list goes on. And so when that instability comes, attendance can shift a little bit. Giving can fluctuate. Rumors begin and uncertainty grows. And before long, anxiety becomes contagious inside the church. Here's what I want you to know. Most church panic doesn't come from facts. It comes from uncertainty. So let's talk about how this usually shows up so you can identify it when you see it. Here's the first thing. Hallway conversations become anxiety centers. Now, just think about that. You've got one member. Think about it. You know that one member. You've got that one member that is just afraid. Maybe they operate out of fear on a regular basis, or maybe they were super close to the pastor, or the pastor protected their pet project, or whatever it may be. But they're afraid now. What's going to happen? And they corner a couple of unsuspecting individuals in the hallway and begins to share that fear with them. Well, now you got 4 people afraid. And now people are starting to assume, well, something must be wrong because 3 becomes 8, becomes 15. Now 2 different classes are chattering about something that isn't about a fact. Somebody was afraid of something, and now you've got everybody all worked up about it. Nothing actually has happened. Well, that's one way that this can show up and how anxiety can spread. Another way is that people just hear things differently. They interpret neutral events from a negative perspective. They just see it negative. Think about this. You've got a prominent family. Maybe they miss a couple of Sundays, maybe 3. And now you've got somebody that's looking at that and wondering, has the Jones family left the church? And what happens is this, a question, have the Jones family left the church? 2 people later becomes fact. The Jones family left the church. Do you see how that turns into just this negative perspective and this negative view? And now the fact spreads like wildfire. They didn't go anywhere. They just were out of town. They had family issues. They had grandma issues. They had kid parties. They've missed for 2 or 3 weeks. But when we're in an anxiety moment, it can blow up into this whole thing, and it doesn't have to be this whole thing. So here's another way that anxiety can spread. Frustration increases over small issues. Think about this. You change the music a little bit, or you adjust what gets announced and what doesn't get announced. It's a popular concept right now is that if it doesn't pertain to over half the church, it shouldn't be announced from the platform. Well, if that's a brand new change that you've brought on in this transition time, it can just raise people's anxiety. They can interpret that negatively. It could be all kinds of things that's going on. So anyway, the announcements could change. Or maybe you make a change in the worship structure. I remember that I moved the offering from the middle of the service to the end of the service. And oh my goodness, you would have thought the whole thing was coming to an end. It just became this big thing because anxiety is already high. Making changes like that in transition moments are not what we need to do because they can be taken wrong. So what do we need to do? What do we need to understand? Well, first of all, people really aren't trying to be difficult. They're just wanting to feel safe and stable again. So how can we lower anxiety? Well, here's how we can help calm a congregation. Number one, increase visible leadership presence. What do I mean by that? I'm here all the time, Aaron. What do you mean? This is what I mean. Stay calm, stay available, stay steady. Anxiety rises, people take things wrong, and it's easy for us leaders to just isolate back and go, well, I'll just hide out until the storm blows over. But reality says they need to have a steady, calm voice. And they need to see this steady calmness coming from the leadership. So we need to be present. We need to be out there. We need to be softening our tone and having a calmness about us because that will also spread, just like anxiety can spread. Here's the number two thing. Communicate regularly, even if there's very little information. Because let me tell you, silence is not what you want. People will assume the worst. I know, we get tired of having to communicate the same thing over and over and over again. But haven't we all heard that it takes 8 times for somebody to hear it once? And by the time we as the leader are sick and tired of talking about it, somebody for the very first time is like, well, I've never heard that before. I know, it can be so aggravating, but we have to communicate regularly, even with very little information. Because if we say nothing at all, people's imaginations run wild and assumptions become facts and facts become all this anxiety, and you don't want that. The third thing you can do is remind people what hasn't changed. They're all focused on what is changing. Well, you know what hasn't changed? The Great Commission. The Great Commission hasn't changed. The Great Commandment hasn't changed. So we need to love God, we need to love our neighbor, and we need to make disciples of all the nations. Guess what? That hasn't changed. It doesn't matter where the offering is. It doesn't matter what the ratio of hymns to praise songs is. It doesn't matter all these. Those haven't changed. God's leadership hasn't changed. The congregation, your church, still has purpose and direction. We have to remind our people, this is what our purpose is. We keep reminding them of this shared mission and the stability in that, and it usually will settle much faster in the transition. Let me leave you with a couple of questions. Where do you see anxiety spreading quietly in your congregation right now? Put that down in the chat and in the notes, and let's have conversations about that. How might your leadership help people move from fear to trust? Put that down in the chat. Let's have conversations about that. Church panic rarely disappears overnight, so it's not going to be quick. But calm leadership steadily lowers anxiety over time. Hey, thanks for spending a few minutes with me today. And if this conversation was helpful, won't you consider sharing it with somebody else who may need encouragement this week? And if you have not already, subscribe to the Church Brain and and receive all the resources that you can each and every week. Remember, God is already ahead of your church in this season, and you are not leading alone. Have a great day.